And Ashraf Ghani is not alone. Afghanistan does not take kindly to any ruler. Whether they're kings, presidents or invaders, all of them have suffered humiliating defeats in this country. They end up fleeing rather than retreating. This week was the latest chapter in that history. A superpower is on the run in Kabul. Another empire chewed up and expelled by Afghanistan. But they never learn. Any military historian will tell you, stay away from Afghanistan. Its geography, its ethnicity, its problematic neighbors, all of these factors make Afghanistan unwinnable. America had two examples to look at. The British Empire in the 19th century and the Soviet Union in the 20th century. Both were routed from Afghanistan. Both lost thousands of soldiers. Unfortunately, the US did not learn from either. Let's talk about the Soviet War, more recent. They invaded Afghanistan in 1979 to bolster the communist government. The operation was rapid, but holding on to Afghanistan proved impossible. They met stiff resistance from the Afghan Mujahideen, funded by the Americans. Some 15,000 Soviet soldiers died, along with 2 million Afghan civilians. It was a fateful war for both sides. The Soviet Union disintegrated 2 years later, and Afghanistan has been at war ever since. America's war was not as violent, but their withdrawal was much worse. For starters, when the Soviets left, the government did not collapse over a weekend. The Democratic Republic of Afghanistan survived for 3 years after the Soviet Union left. What did they do different? You could say the Soviets planned better. They signed the Geneva Accords at the United Nations in 1988. The US and Pakistan were brought on board. What did this accord talk about? It set a timetable for troop withdrawal. It provided rules to handle Afghan refugees. So everyone was on the same page. But the US did the opposite. They kept the Afghan government out of the Doha talks. Instead, they negotiated with the Taliban. Look where we are today. Then you have the military operation itself. The Soviets had 100,000 soldiers deployed in 1988. The pullout happened in two phases, one in mid-1988, the second in early 1989. Most importantly, it did not happen at midnight. They also planned for contingencies. Tanks and artillery units were deployed to protect retreating soldiers. Local ceasefires were negotiated, and the Afghan government was largely in the loop. Did the US do any of this? Well, they tried, but with little success. You see, America was in a hurry to leave, so they forgot about the Afghan people and the Afghan army. Here's another key difference. The Soviets continued to help the Afghan government even during withdrawal. In January 1989, they attacked Ahmad Shah Massoud and his Mujahideen. They also flew 1,000 sorties against the Afghan government's rivals. Reports say 600 of Massoud's men were killed. Compare this to what the US did. No air support, no military contractors, just hollow words from the US president. And that's precisely why the Afghan government fell like a pack of cards. In 1989, the Soviets kept funding Kabul. They spent nearly $3 billion on humanitarian and military aid. They gave the Afghan army tanks, helicopters, rockets, artillery guns. The Mujahideen were kept at bay for 3 full years. The bottom line is this: the Soviet withdrawal was much more professional. They were also perhaps much luckier. For example, they shared a border with Afghanistan, so the Soviets drove out. The Americans are being airlifted. But these excuses don't really justify America's failure. Their intel and process were both wrong. Those are the differences between the two withdrawals. What are the parallels? First and obvious, both sides lost. Whether the withdrawal was perfect or not, the Soviets lost. They lost soldiers, they lost assets, and ended up running just like the US. Both superpowers meddled in a foreign country. They thought their power and money gave them the right to do so. They invaded without asking. They fled without asking. Afghanistan's history will not be kind to these countries. We often romanticize Afghanistan's image as the graveyard of empires. It's also a reflection of the sad reality of repeated invasions, wars, and trauma. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.